What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today we're going to be breaking down the Batgirl gameplay that was delivered on Twitter by the developers. It is 33 seconds. It's not really long, but there are some nuggets in here, and it has answered about 3 or 4 questions that I've had regarding the combat for Gotham Knight. Because in the 2020 gameplay trailer, there were some questions that I still had. It was still one of those things where we got to see Batgirl and we kind of accepted the fact that she was probably going to play the most like Batman, and the developers actually confirmed that. They said if you're looking for a character, that's probably going to play like Batman, it seems like Batgirl is going to be that person. So in this gameplay trailer, we're going to be looking at those questions that were answered. I'm going to show you the animations, some of the moves that were even used in some of the trailers, and you're going to see for yourself that they're actually in the game. So sit back, relax, let's go, and let's jump into this. All right, first things first is Batgirl pretty much jumps into a traversal where she's pretty much just gliding. And I have to say that this is really good. For the longest time, we've been wondering how these characters are going to move. Some people want to play a Batman-esque type character. Batgirl does have that representation. Her cape and, her outfit is somewhat similar to Batman, if not one of the most similar to Batman among all of the knights. Maybe you can argue for Robin, but depending on the suit he's wearing, you get to see that, representation. So she pretty much glides across this, I think it looks like the front of a theater, and she is able to evade an obstacle in a very smooth way. So this really does say that the gliding mechanic seems to be in very, very good shape for this character. So that's actually pretty good. She makes her way to the crime scene, that's the ongoing crime. She lands on this enemy NPC and does this very popular takedown that we got to see in the 2022 reveal. So that's actually pretty good. So I told you all, it's in the game. It's in the game. Y'all kept saying, but it's in the game. It's easier to take the existing assets, the existing animations, and make your trailer. Yes, trailer is going to have higher quality, but that's why it's a trailer. So we got to see this, and here it is in the character trailer for your own viewing pleasure. All right, the second move that she actually pulls off, though, is one that we haven't seen before. So when she actually takes down this enemy NPC, the first one, it causes some kind of a scare mechanic or some kind of a shock mechanic on this enemy NPC. So possibly the closest NPC to her when the takedown is done pretty much, stumbled off their own feet and fell down. And then she uses this elemental strike where she charges it up and bam, takes out that enemy on the floor, which answers my very first question that I've had for a while, which is how are you to attack enemies that are already on the floor? It appears that we have one way now, because if you've played other games, there are finishers that you can do to enemies on the floor. Sometimes if you're attacking, the animation changes depending on the location of the enemy. So we don't know if you can use basic strikes for enemies that are already on the ground, but there is some kind of an elemental strike apparently, and she uses it to pretty much disperse of this particular enemy NPC. Immediately, she does a quick fire. So to me, I think the input queuing is actually pretty solid. The moment you finish that elemental strike, she's able to just let off a batarang to the enemy NPC that's closest to her. And as she does that, she's able to quickly make her way and quickly start doing whatever it is, maybe a basic strike, or maybe if she wanted to do a heavy attack, I don't know how she would have had to pull it off, and she whacks him, which answers my second question. How is Batgirl going to close the distance with enemies that are a few yards away from her? Because if you notice, she does that quick fire and then in like 2 steps, like she runs. I think this is a sprint attack. So as you're sprinting, you pretty much hit the attack button and then you go into a sprint attack type animation. She hits the enemy NPC and then she does a dodge real quick. So this answers my question in a sense, and I think it really does lend to the hypothesis that I had that this combat system feels to me like, Batman-like attacks and some of the God of War type, dodges and rune attacks and even maybe sprint attacks that you actually have in the game. So this is pretty cool. I mean, somebody also compared it to maybe Jedi Fallen Order, but that has some other systems which, you could say, yeah, sure, whatever. And then as she does that dodge, she's able to make her way over to this NPC with a heavy strike. And there's also some kind of an interesting animation interpolation that she does, like a multi-step, look at it, boom, like it's a multi-step turnaround thing. I think it's pretty decent. I mean, it's not the Barbara from Arkham Knight where she had specific animations and interp protocols that she could pretty much do a flying kick and go ahead and hit an enemy like that. So you as the player, it seems like you can choose whichever you want. If you want to do a run attack to close the gap, then that works for you. Then maybe these heavy attacks, they probably allow for you to maybe move somehow and change the animation as you're, in a different movement speed to be able to hit the enemy. So that's pretty decent. I don't mind it. I think it's actually decent. And then immediately there seems to be the interpolation question that I've been asking. It's really short. It's really fast, but take a close look at it. She goes straight and covers this distance to hit this enemy NPC. So what this tells us is this is not necessarily going to be like the Arkham games where the interp distance was almost limitless. You could go from one side of the room to tap somebody all the way on the other side, but depending on the distance and the closeness to the character, you're able to pretty much do a strike attack. I'm fine with this, okay? Sure, like I said, I'm going to try my best not to compare with Arkham, but there are questions that I had in my head, and I think these are getting answered for me. So she attacks this enemy NPC multiple times, and she whiffs this final hit. Now, this is actually a hit. In the trailer, you notice, or if you remember, she does this and hits one of those heavy enemy NPCs, and that's why I strongly believe that this is a hit that kind of whiffed. So this enemy probably, got knocked out too quick, bam, and, I guess the person was still hitting the strike button, and, she just did that strike. And at the same time, she's trying to dodge this elemental attack that's actually coming for her. So this indicator shows that the enemy NPCs are trying to, maybe hit her with something that you can't maybe necessarily tank or block, so you have to get out of the way. So as she's actually finishing this animation where she hits her back on the ground, she gets up and slides away and just dodges. Very smooth. Now, again, the input queuing, which is a very interesting term in game development, it just means when you hit an input and you're, carrying out the action for that input, you can hit another input and that input's going to wait till that animation finishes playing, and then that input would then execute. That's one way to look at it, but it's much more complex, but that's just the base level explanation of that. So maybe as that person hit the ground, they already hit that dodge. You see the way the animation transitions. It's quite, I like the way it does do that. And so she dodges that and then does more quick fire. So quick fire, and then she does a batarang pull and a dodge, which is interesting. And a dodge into another attack. Or maybe because, if you think about it, that looked like a dodge where she dodged that enemy NPC right now that was actually trying to come hit her with their baseball bat. They walk around the fire, they're about to hit her, and she, it says she dodges and then hits this enemy NPC with a basic strike and moves away and then faces the enemy NPC, and then she sprints over there and goes in for the beatdown, which is bam, 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 and does that finisher. That finisher is from 2020. So here is the finisher here that you can actually take a look at. You're going to see that it's pretty much the same thing. And to me, it looks like a finisher that is reminiscent of ones that are supposed to be for maybe grunts. And then there's probably a finisher that looks like that that's for heavies, because she does another one for a heavy in that character trailer. That's one that we're still yet to see, because we haven't necessarily seen the knights take on the grunts. And so that's something that would be really cool, to pay very close attention to. So this particular gameplay trailer, and I said I watched it for over the course of many, many hours, it really did explain a lot to me. I was very curious as to how they were going to go ahead and execute a lot of this stuff, how they were going to go ahead and, pretty much showcase her combat in a small crowd. And I think the next question is, if you remember the Red Hood and Nightwing gameplay, that was a bigger space. So how is she going to perform in that kind of a space? Because all we've seen is her being in combat scenarios in a very close proximity. Whereas for Nightwing and Red Hood, we've seen them in combat sequences that are actually in wider spaces, like that rooftop, or even that room where Nightwing was when he broke into the Court of Owls, secret lair. If you compare the way he fought with these enemy NPCs compared to the ones he fought in a close combat, it seemed like there was this slight difference as to how they closed the gap. And I think this is why Rocksteady applied the, free flow system to be able to close the gap as quickly as possible. But again, This is Gotham Knight, so I'm going to make sure I'm doing my comparisons within the parameters here. I'll do another video maybe down the road and kind of talk about these gameplay mechanics and why Rocksteady chose some of the different, mechanics that they chose, not necessarily out of the fact that they wanted to come up with something new, but it could have been they just wanted to be like, man, it's fun to close the gap, but how are you going to do it in a way that allows for the player to not necessarily have to deal with too much, issues in terms of having to run all the time to close the gap and here on and so forth. Another really interesting thing that I wanted to go ahead and, suggest at the end of this video is there is this pet peeve that I have with Gotham Knights so far with all of the gameplay, and it may not change. One of them is the indicators of enemies that are about to hit you. Their weapons still have these weird, signals around them. This enemy NPC, as they're about to hit, Batgirl with a baseball bat here, it still has this weird circle that's around it. I don't know if that's like, for a multi-million-dollar game, there could be a better indicator that you're about to get hit. I mean, right? Something that is comic-y, something that is artsy, and I think they really need to go ahead and look at that and probably try to transform it. See, like here, it's just a circle. So I hope this is, like I've said, I hope this is a placeholder and this is not the final work. We're going to be getting a game with, circles. That just does not necessarily, bode well. And if anything, they should just remove it so that we can just, learn to anticipate the enemy attacks like other video games that we play, or maybe use a different thing, like, maybe highlight them in different colors. If they're about to strike you, then the enemy is highlighted in one color in a way that you can maybe dodge or interrupt or use one of your, heroic attacks. And if they're about to hit you with an attack, then they use a different color for an attack that you cannot necessarily, block. Then you have to actually dodge, or maybe you have to do something special to reply to that. So that's one thing. The second thing is this targeting indicator that tells you that you're about to get hit with a, projectile or some kind of an area of effect attack. Now, I have to go ahead and actually say this. You see, if you play Arkham Knight, and I know someone's going to tell me this is not an Arkham game. It's not, but this is a game mechanic, question. And many games don't have this stuff, and it really makes their combat kind of a little bit behind, or a few steps behind. In Arkham Knight, when you're playing in a mob and you're fighting a bunch of bad guys, you're on your own for regular attacks. But when an enemy NPC is about to hit you with a projectile or a ranged attack, the game actually tells you in a subtle way. It's the most subtle thing you'll ever see in a video game. As you're controlling the camera and fighting, the camera by itself resets your orientation so that you can see that enemy that's about to maybe use their, rifle to shoot at you, or maybe an enemy NPC that's about to run towards you. Arkham Knight was so good at doing this, and it's another thing that's missing in even games like God of War and even Jedi Fallen Order. If you're fighting a whole bunch of enemies, you're free game. One can try to come up on you. The indicator will show that this is about to be an attack that you can't dodge or that you can't block or whatever. But if you can't see them and your camera orientation is not facing that enemy, they'll hit you. So even if you're going for a no damage run, and I know some people might say you're trying to add combos. I've seen these complaints and I'm like, guys, it's not always about the combos. Sometimes it's about the no hit, no damage, executions that you're trying to pull off. It's nice for you to be able to see those things. But I guess there will be compensating, measures that you can use in God of War. There's a quick turn measure that you could use. You hit the D-pad down and Kratos will just quickly turn around and see what's behind him if you're kind of suspicious that maybe an enemy is about to hit you. But Jedi Fallen Order, all you got to do is, back off and run around and find a way to deal with it. So we might be able to find a way to deal with it here in this game. But that indicator, I don't know. It's just a personal thing anyways. So I don't think the developers are going to have to change their entire paradigm and deal with camera movement just because some guy on YouTube says so. But if they can, though, it'll be really nice. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching the video. Appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.